Okay, thank you. Town of North Smithfield, Halliwell Review Committee, meeting for November 4th, 2021. We are now adjourning, and we're going to start with roll call. Mr. Girton?
Here.
Mr. Najarian?
Here.
Ms. Chartier?
Here.
Mr. Mayo?
Here.
And the chair is here. Next up on the agenda is review and approval of draft meeting minutes from October 21st, 2021 meeting. Give everyone a minute to look at those over.
Well, I'm just curious for the YMCA, understanding that these are just minutes and it's a general overview. But should we put a conclusion as to what the next action item was on that matter, or just leave it kind of as is?
Well, I think they said the next action in their mind would be a joint subcommittee.
No, I understood, but
Does it say that in the minutes? I'm sorry. No.
I don't believe it does.
No.
Okay, all right.
So I think where we had left it with them is that they wanted to see our survey. So I did provide that over to them, so they do have that. And then the next steps for us would essentially be recommending to town council if we need to form a subcommittee, because ultimately they have the power to do so.
That's what I thought. So I didn't know if we just leave it as is or if we add that to the minutes. Only because we know that anything we do further than this should be sanctioned by the town council, otherwise we're kind of
I
going down the
agree.
road. Unless we have permission to go down the road, all we're gonna do is disappoint ourselves if we
Yeah.
don't.
And I think if
I
we're...
agree with the road, but I
Yeah.
think
Right.
we need to have all hands.
Yep, and if we're gonna make that recommendation, I think that can be one of the items that we recommend to the town council along with our final report.
Okay, so we just wanna leave the minutes as is? It's just open-ended, that's all. If it doesn't
Yeah.
matter, it's not that important.
I think that's okay.
I make a motion to accept it.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion to accept in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, next on the agenda for discussion, consideration, and action, review of the Weston and Sampson invoice. I did forward the memo from Carolyn Wells over to everybody, and then upon some further digging after the town council meeting, just to kind of see where we stand with them, the town council approved the amendment to remove task 5, the market analysis, which would bring our total contract to $75,019. However, total invoice to date, including the September invoice, brings Weston and Sampson to $75,212.10. So $193.10 over from where they are. So,
Any idea where that came from?
where what came from?
193.
That's just the difference from,
That's the difference. We know where it is.
well, we haven't paid the September invoice.
Okay.
So the $20,892.25 is still outstanding. We have not recommended to town council payment in any form.
I got you.
So me personally, because this basically bills out the project at 100%, I don't feel comfortable approving that.
I feel strongly that we should pay nothing further, unless we have something that's, has been outstanding for a while, but we should pay nothing further until we get the final report. I hate to be candid, but if we get a final report that it kind of stays in the middle of the road and is just a bunch of vanilla, for what we've paid, I can, in my mind, I can pick 10 people who could have walked through that facility, volunteer, and made the same assessment. That the only thing we would have gained for $75,000 is the delineation of the wetlands, and we could have had that done by a local business in Burrville for a fraction of that. So I think we have every right, since we've waited patiently, and you've gone out of your way multiple times to urge them, I think we have every right to hold it or give some, but hold back a significant amount like we would with retainage, to give them the added incentive to perform their contract. How much do you think is worthy? The balance due currently is, where is it? Oh. It's 20, right? It's a total, no, wait a minute, total, outstanding invoice is 40,000.
Those two invoices were just approved by town council. The first two, the one that's dated 8/17 and the other one that's dated 9/22. However, that $27,000 balance was less for the meetings. If you recall that discussion, we held back some amount of the balance to cover the meetings for the town council presentation.
Well, I don't think holding 40 is fair, but holding one of those invoices, I think, would be.
I think I'd be in agreement that holding the September invoice is fine.
Yep.
And, you know, we need to see more progress and more deliverables.
Yeah, because I think the point is, if you held 40, they could get up in arms and say, you're being overly aggressive, you have no reason to do this, you're being adversarial. If you hold 12, we're looking at them, come on, $12,000 is not a significant sum relative to the total, especially when what we're waiting for is the grand finale, and you've been slow to produce.
Executive summary is what we're waiting for. Getting.
Is that right?
What beyond that, in your estimation, Jeff, have they not delivered upon? Not financially, but what big benchmarks have they not delivered?
Well, I think really we need to see, let's see. They did provide us with the Class 4 survey. That's been completed. So, but for this September invoice, that's only running $74. The site conditions assessment, that's part of the report that they need to wrap up, and we asked them to provide additional information for the structural portion and a little bit more meat to the architectural portion. The property research, I would say, is likely complete based on the report that we've been given thus far. Wetland delineation is completed at this point. However, we have not seen, the only final thing that we've seen is just within the report. We haven't seen any final drawings or anything in that nature. The utilities and roadway assessment, that seems to be complete within the report. But the bulk of this is the $10,399 for the report and conceptual alternatives. And we only just saw the draft report at the end of September, and we're still waiting on the final draft with all of our revisions and comments on them. And I haven't seen any progress updates from them on that, so.
Holding that entire 10,000 total balance.
So would this 20,000 be less though, that research and that wetland stuff, the stuff that you said that was completed?
So I would say, at this point, I would say.
Or are they billing for something that, I mean, if they don't, why are they billing for something that they're not doing?
Haven't completed yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, according to this summary, there's only 1% of the contract that's incomplete, and that's at task 7. And we clearly know that it's almost comical for them to submit this and expect us to just smile and say yes. I mean, the executive summary, I certainly hope it's worth more than 1% of the contract, of that line item, never mind.
Right.
I heard a little bit.
Agreed.
The town is, I mean, people, I'm not hearing nice things. They're not saying that I've heard that people are not impressed with what they've been delivered at all from Weston and Sampson. Not from us, but from Weston and Sampson. They're just, it is subpar work.
Well, that may be very true, but of course, all we could do is operate with what we were given.
Right, but going forward, I'm just wondering, why are they billing for something that they're not doing? I mean, I don't understand why this is an invoice because they're not doing it.
No, I think the invoice is correct. It's just,
We wanted it revised.
Yeah.
They submitted it, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they submitted that. We wanted it revised.
Right, and I think we have.
And they haven't given us the revision yet, or the executive
So,
summary.
so There has been work that has been completed based on what has been delivered thus far, but there's also work that has not been completed.
Okay.
So really,
Projection.
so what I think we need to be tasked with is just, let's look at what hasn't been delivered and how much do we want to hold back? Or are we just going to hold back the entire invoice and say, well, we'll catch up with you?
Well, no, I think you hit it. We never did get the structural analysis. I could make a stink and say that we repeatedly, on the conceptuals, multiple meetings, I indicated that the fire chief requested that we incorporate a second means of egress. He didn't just say it might be a good idea, he made it clear that I will request it, so please. And multiple times, I brought that up, and multiple times I was told that it would be factored in, and it doesn't appear on any of the 5. So, not to make but to make a specific point that she, on multiple times, acknowledged the need to do that from feedback directly from municipal authorities, and they didn't do it. The structural component, we know that we asked for that repeatedly. She repeatedly indicated that it was in the works. Of course, we know that all they probably are going to do is take a boilerplate, cut and paste like they did with building 1 through 10, where it was literally verbatim, just cut and paste, cut and paste, cut and paste. But the point is, if we're trying to come up with that final recommendation, that structural analysis is a critical component.
Absolutely.
So that's missing. The executive summary is missing. And you know what, to play hardball, just because we've frankly been disappointed or less than pleased. And so I can respect the fact that people watching or listening maybe as well. We should play a little hardball and say, you know what, if you're going to offer those 5, then we want 5 versions of an egress, another means of egress. Whether they do it superficially just to satisfy us, but we need to at least address it, because if we don't, we didn't really do our job, because we made it clear that that was one of our criteria and it hasn't been met yet. And you know what? It just isn't that hard. We know that there's only 1 or 2 things that they could possibly do, but you should show it, and show it how it would interact with whatever the concept, whatever one we're talking about. So I feel that we have a very solid basis to articulate our concerns.
I agree with that, but if they're gonna bill us to do more work, I don't think it's worth billing to do more work.
No, I think categorically make it clear that this is not billable work. The structural analysis, you never told us that would be above and beyond. The only thing she ever said was, if you want us to get staging or a lift and open up, that's beyond our scope. But what is in our scope is have a structural engineer walk through, do a visual on the structural framing that's exposed. And based on the exposed structural framing, give a reasoned opinion. We never said, get the lift, get the laborer, open up the sheathing, let's look at the under. So that was never even entertained. And the idea of the fire, the second means, we play very hardball and say, hey, you never told us. How hard is it to do? You're doing conceptuals. How hard was it to put that as your conceptual? That shouldn't even be discussed as an option for additional billable work. None of this should even be entertained as additional work, billable work, in my opinion.
I think part of the problem is that, if my memory serves me, there's been a little bit of pushback on their end as far as what the specific scope is all about, and what they feel that it should be included as part of what they're going to deliver and what our expectations are. So maybe we have that discussion with them. Maybe a letter, Jeff, that's put together that says, these were our expectations, and based upon the actual contract and what's included in the scope of work, this is what our expectation was to be delivered, and we haven't gotten it. And I think if it's put to them that way, then they say yes or no.
And to take that a step further, we have no correspondence, do we, from them in writing, saying, Jeff, you know, what you and your committee are asking for, it's pushing that line of what's within our scope and what's outside. I don't think any of us ever heard, other than what I just said about structural, we never heard anyone, her or anyone else, you officially say, you know, we got the pushback and they said if they want us to do these two things, they want a change order. We
Yeah.
never got that.
And,
So
and
you're right.
however, to play devil's advocate, just to play devil's advocate, they will likely come back and say, well, we owed you 3 conceptual designs, we've given you 5. So there could be a little bit of disagreement in that
Fine, then tell
perspective.
them to put the egress on 2, on 3.
Yeah. And-
Well, we only asked for 3, and you gave, thank you for that.
Yeah.
But this is what you didn't deliver on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I can certainly relay the fact that we did mention things multiple times and we're still not seeing them.
Yeah.
So I think,
I think we're being very reasonable.
and I mean, honestly, from my perspective, it's taking Photoshop and adding a gray road
Yeah.
in one spot.
Exactly. It's,
So,
in some ways, I'm laughing at myself because it's trivial, but it proves the point, that you didn't do what you said you were gonna do. And it is a real concern to us, because no matter what is done there, it will be a requirement. So we might
Yep.
as well start to show it so people start to accept it.
Okay.
And there are other implications of that, which would be legal arrangements, because we have no direct access to another public street from the
Right.
property.
When we get deeper into it, isn't the next stages with the, I know that we're asking for that, but I feel like, well, if they do it, they're gonna give us one of the drawings with a gray line in one of them. So, I understand what you're saying, but like,
I still think they should, because it is it was direct feedback from a municipal chief of department. It wasn't just something we heard at Autumn Fest or Pumpkin
Yeah.
Fest. It
Well,
was a specific feedback that said,
Yeah.
this is what is being asked. We need to incorporate it. She acknowledged it multiple times. So I'm just trying to prove the point.
Yeah.
And also, because I also want it to be reflective of what we submit. The fire chief, I told him that, now is the time to factor that in.
right.
And again, it may be a superficial, oh, you want this, okay, here it is, big deal. But it still proves the point that, and you know what, it's gonna take somebody probably an hour to do.
It's a piece of the puzzle, and we're trying to complete the puzzle. So to whatever extent they can provide that, it's what we want.
Yeah, and what we asked for.
Yep.
Why else, why did we have engagement if anything we asked for had to be
Right.
analyzed? I'd make a motion unless we have further discussion, that we hold in retainage or in abatement the 12,535.35, or
Well,
that we,
That one's been,
Or is
that one got paid.
Oh,
That-
that's
well,
paid.
That one's paid.
20,000 is
It's,
something
it's the 20,892.25.
oh, here it is, I had the wrong
The
piece of
September
paper.
invoice that's outstanding.
Which would leave a balance of 87.48 plus or minus?
No, that would complete that would bill everything out 100%.
Oh, so this invoice is not what we should be looking at. Oh, here it is here. I was just looking at the old invoices,
Yeah,
because it said total.
yep, those are the outstanding invoices.
So, on this piece of paper, the only, well, when it's all said and done, we owe them 20,892.
Minus the 193 because they're
Yeah.
overbilling.
Okay, just the
But, yeah.
minor math thing. So we're either gonna assign 60% or 70% of that amount, holding back 30. What I would put out there is that we hold back 30 or 40% of the amount due, let the math be what it is. And we indicate that pending receipt of the structural analysis, pending receipt of the executive summary, and pending receipt of 3 modified conceptual plans showing fire second means of egress to the site. I mean, a holdback of 30% seems, in my opinion, is enough motivation to get things done. It's not 50%, which is kind of onerous, 30%, I don't find that to be excessive.
I don't know, I'm of the notion to play, I guess I play hardball, but
You-
I
What
would,
do you wanna hold back?
I'd
Bob?
hold
You
back the whole thing.
30% of the 75,000 or of the?
No, 30% of the balance due, which is 30% of 20,
So you hold back six.
essentially. Something like that, yeah. I mean, you can make it more, but, you know, just my experience, and of course, Jeff's in the same tangential business here, is that, you know, you can play hardball, but if
Well,
you still want
in
things
the
performed,
contract, you know, people usually hold back 10%.
that's
So everything-
retainage, yeah.
Everything is done, the punch list is done, everything's done. So 10% of 75,000 is 7,500.
Yeah, but the problem with that logic, even though it's on the mark, is that we didn't introduce it in the beginning. So, you know, normally with professional services, you don't have retainage. You have retainage for,
Professional services laws.
true, but retainage, it's either in the contract or it's
I
not.
understand.
It wouldn't be fair to then introduce that term
I think
now.
the more we hold back, the more we're gonna get as a response from them.
But the
I think the less
opposite
we
may,
hold back,
yeah,
they're just gonna say.
the opposite may be true too, that if you hold it all back, they're gonna become
I'm not
belligerent.
suggesting we hold it all back.
Yeah,
I'm suggesting we hold 10,000 back,
well, that would be 50%.
okay? Because they haven't given us everything, and I think there should be that incentive to finalize everything.
Well, if you use your logic, if we take 10,000, interestingly, that is what, a little bit more than 10% of the
Correct.
total contract
That's
value.
correct.
So it's, you know, I have no problem with the 50, if that's just
When is
something
it
to
due?
talk about.
When is the payment due?
Let's see.
What was it?
Yeah, what would the
That's the
term?
following month?
Payment is due 30 days from invoice date, but I mean, we just also approved their most previous two invoices, which were dated August 17th and September 22nd, and we're here on November 4th.
I would like to offer that in my business, we like to get paid. But we also want a happy customer and a referenceable customer when it's all done, right? So, before, holding money back is kind of drastic, because they have bills to pay as well. I understand the concept, I understand, how it's important to convey the message that we haven't received everything we've wanted, everything we've expected. But at the same time, before we get to that step, I think it might be prudent to send them a message about that expectation and allude to the fact that we don't feel we should pay in full or to the extent that they expect payment until those expectations are met. And in other words, work with them before we take the step of holding payment back.
I'm under the impression that Jeff and Chris have gone out of their way to try to work with them, and we still
not
haven't
discounting
accomplished, oh, wait a minute, and we still haven't accomplished the task. How long do we ask them to work with us before we take an action? That's
Well,
my
that's the
point.
problem, Bob. In there, we've heard from them already that their expectation is the contract goes on for a year, right?
All right, then we
So-
hold back the money for a year. That's easy, till it's done. That's easy. I mean, let's keep it simple. We're not happy with the performance. There's parts of what they've done so far, we've asked them to redo and to reconsider. They haven't given us the executive summary. And so I think it's very fair to say, we're not gonna pay you the full amount of this contract until we get those things done. And I think we've asked you nicely, I know it's from what I've heard from Jeff and Chris, have tried to work with their representative. And, you know, so I feel strongly it's time to say no. $10,000 back until it's
Can you
done.
clarify one thing, so I understand? If you look at this sheet, the land use study sheet, it shows September invoice number 4, total 20,892, and it says total remaining 8748. I just want to make sure I understand. Is the balance
That
due
that
20,892, or is it 2829 and change?
Well, for that total, that actually includes the market analysis.
Okay,
So
so,
that's why I went and did my own.
okay,
Excel
so
sheet.
here, the simple math is that we have a balance due, total balance on the contract of the $20,892, okay. And we've been billed in its entirety. So, Tony, the only point I would make, which we both can appreciate, is, and Jeff as well, on his projects, he would never approve an invoice for 100% of a subcontractor's work if he knew that the work was not complete. He would send it back, laugh, and say, come on, get serious. Why are you sending me an invoice for 100%? I would never bill a owner-client 100% if I knew that, obviously, the only reason I would is if it was expectation that it's clear that during the time of processing the invoice, the work will be 100%, and you told me that you want the invoice in by a certain date, and therefore.
That's fair.
That's why I
They're
submitted it.
setting the expectation that the work is done.
Yeah, so you could argue that, okay, you submitted it, did we respond to the invoice?
I had asked for a revised one that doesn't overbill us, but that was
Okay.
the extent of it. I wanted to discuss it, but I think at this point, what I'm hearing from everybody is we send this back with a statement that says, the work is not 100% complete. You are billing out 100% complete. Please send us a revised invoice that, one, shows the market analysis removed from the contract, because that has now been approved,
Okay.
and send us a new one that shows the appropriate percentage complete of the project. And I think we just leave it at that. And then they can tell us where they feel, because I can say to them quite simply, we're clearly not at 100% for this project, otherwise we'd be wiping our hands, shaking your hands, and saying, thank you very much, and we're done.
Yep.
But we're not. So I think at this point, all we really should, rather than argue how much to hold back, how much we should, want to hold in retainage and whatnot, why don't we put it back on them and say, please review this with your accounting department, and you tell us what percentage you feel you are complete, because we feel that you're clearly not at 100%.
Subject to approval.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fine. And
Could
you-
I suggest that we also tell them specifically what is lacking in the total performance, i.e. the executive summary, the second egress or ingress, and what else was there? There was structural. Spell out exactly what it is, so there's no misunderstanding of the term, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And then we go back and forth for another 2 weeks, okay?
Yep.
Thank
When
you.
did we receive this last invoice?
We received this, what was the date on it? October 26th,
Okay.
so. So I think that's, honestly, that's what some clients would do with me. If they felt they were being overbilled, take another look at this. And, I wouldn't bill out 100% of a project that's not complete, that's just me. But anyways, so that will be our, I don't think we need to take any actions on that tonight. I think I've heard everybody's.
Consensus.
And
Yep.
just move forward from there. So this next one is actually relatively easy. If you caught the town council meeting on Monday, then you already know the timeline. If you didn't, then this is kind of our update. Based on our conversation with Weston and Sampson, Chris and I had a Zoom call, and we came to the determination and agreed upon the following timeline. That November 29th, the Monday after Thanksgiving, the Halliwell Review Committee will receive the final report. At that time, just in time for our December 2nd meeting, we'll review and ultimately, hopefully there's no major changes, but ultimately recommend the report to town council. On December 13th, there is scheduled a special meeting with the Halliwell Review Committee and the town council, similar to what they did for the police station with the MBRTF. So it will just be us on the agenda, and Weston and Sampson will give their presentation. There will be a public hearing, so folks can come and ask questions if necessary. And then ultimately, when we get into January, that will be when this committee finalizes our recommendations to town council, and we'll present those recommendations on on what we feel can be done as outlined in our resolution, and also potential next steps for them to take.
Question, I think that's wonderful. The only thing I'm wondering is, would it not be productive to have another joint meeting without Weston and Sampson present prior to us sending our summary to the town council, just so that we can speak freely and engage them? I don't know, does that make sense?
I'd be fine with that.
I'd be fine with that, I think that's an excellent idea, actually.
Because the problem is, if we don't want to speak freely necessarily, or as candidly as we may, with Weston and Sampson present, because it's going to cast a shadow on many, and that's not that's not going to be productive. Whether we feel we're valid in our comments
It
or
might
not.
be a good idea for the council to hear our remarks and concerns, right? So we're all on the same page, so they know, I mean, we've spent a lot of time on this. We, by virtue of that time spent, we know a bit more than they do to fill them in and make sure we're all on the same page when time comes to get in front of, or to get them in front of us.
So now the question would be, if we think that's a good idea, do we do it prior or post?
Prior.
Prior.
If you're gonna go into a legal proceeding, you're gonna go and interview them first.
Yeah.
I mean,
I disagree, I'd say post. Get the Weston and Sampson done, and then have a meeting with them.
Well,
Because,
that was my thought.
yeah,
That's
I
what I wanted to get
certainly
to.
think that's the way to go.
Yeah.
After we had the Weston and Sampson, then we meet with the council.
And I would agree with that as well. I think once Weston and Sampson gives their presentation, that essentially puts all the cards on the table. And then that way, we can point to their presentation and say, these are why we're making these recommendations, this is why we're thinking the way we're thinking, and really kind of use the Weston and Sampson presentation as an introduction to what ultimately our recommendations will be.
well, could we meet with them so if they have any, like, if they can, questions that they have specifically about something, that they can ask specifically to them?
Well, I think,
That's what I was thinking, that if they had specific questions, then they would be able to direct them while they were there.
well, I think that will be the purpose of the joint meeting with Weston and Sampson's presentation. That'll give the town council to ask Weston and Sampson all the questions about the report, and go into about that
They would have
fashion.
had the report, been able to digest it
Yeah.
prior to the presentation.
I don't know that we'll get the council to meet with us all that many times.
Okay.
They have, pretty full docket.
Calendar.
I think if we get them a couple times, that's a good thing. So,
Should we try to wedge that in between the January and the December 13th? Or just push the
I-
January out a little bit?
I think it's, I think we're getting to the point where we want to make sure we are taking our time, being thoughtful of our recommendations, making sure that, as Steve said a couple meetings ago, we're all on a united front and we're all kind of going in the same direction. Because, I know this past council meeting, they were jockeying around with some other dates for, January, February meetings too. So I think, before we schedule a second meeting with town council, let's have the cards fall where they do with our first joint meeting, and then kind of regroup and see what our feel is. If council is confident enough in us to just say, meet with ourselves, and then we have one of the council meetings, we provide our recommendations at that time, then we can do that. If they feel that we need to have a joint meeting for recommendations and a discussion, then I think we can certainly entertain that. But I would say, let's get Weston and Sampson wrapped up, let's get our presentation to town council done as a joint meeting, and then we can continue to move forward.
Good point, I agree.
The only other, if I'm off track, but I think we have to be delicate as to how we weave in the potential for the YMCA. Because, I mean, the last thing we should do is let it fall on the wayside, unless the town council says, no, that's not the direction we're going. If they are receptive to it, then we can create whatever subcommittee to get a little further to determine whether it's even a viable idea.
Right.
But I don't think we should let it, if it's going to find its way into the mainstream, it should probably be sooner than later. So I don't know, do we introduce this? Weston and Sampson has no knowledge of it. Do we leave that alone?
They were
And-
aware of it. We talked about it when they were here. We talked about discussing the possibility, because I asked Carol if she'd ever dealt with Y.
But you honestly think that she gave that any consideration?
I think she gave that the same consideration as given everything.
Yeah, okay. So that's all I'm saying is, handle it as you think you
Yeah.
should, but we
I-
don't want it to fall by the
Certainly not.
wayside, and we don't, but we also can't take too many steps forward without,
Right.
uh,
And I think the why discussion, I think, needs a little bit more depth. And while I appreciate the four other voices at this table, there's also four other voices that are not here tonight as well. And I know that there were some strong feelings about moving forward in that direction as well. So I think you bring up a good point. We do need to look at it and examine it and see how it might work within our purview. But I think that discussion needs to kind of be tabled for when we're all present and together.
oh, I agree, but we should remember to put
Yes.
an agenda
Yep.
item so we can all kind of speak freely on it and see where the dust settles.
Sure.
I just have one other quick off topic. We had talked about with the garden club, the garden.
The community garden.
The community garden, that we were going to give them another spot. I know we're going into winter, but I know that you have to do some stuff too, and so I had also thought, that maybe we want to talk to them and see where they potentially would want it to be, because I was walking around that, and that softball field is full sun all the time, and I don't know if they want that, so, it's, I don't mind reaching out to her and see what she says, but I think it needs to be done, moving
Relatively soon,
forward,
yeah.
because you have to prepare the earth and the ground, so I just wanna be cognizant of that.
The
Yep.
big thing with the garden is they need water.
Yeah.
Where they are now, they're near water. If you moved it down the hill, there's no tap. You'd have to tie into the well and develop a tap, which is an expense. I don't know if we want to go through that expense, so I think, I've seen that garden. They could make it bigger right where it is, quite honestly. There's room to make it bigger if they want to make it bigger. So,
Yeah, but I think the point is that soon, hopefully,
yeah,
otherwise we're just wasting our time. Soon, we're gonna be abating asbestos, somebody is, whether it's this committee or the town in some form will be abating asbestos. And it's clear that the majority of the buildings, it's fair to say, will be destroyed.
Right.
Therefore, you're gonna have contaminants and dust and debris, construction safety issues. So you're gonna have to move it, and then the only other thing I was gonna say is, there's a hydrant there at the cul-de-sac, I believe. The DPW, the fire department, it's done 1,000 times. You put a fitting on there, they tap it, you get a water line with a shut off. It's right at the cul-de-sac,
oh, really?
the turnaround. Yeah, so that can easily be just adapted through the DPW. It's done all the time on water projects.
The fire department goes down there and is always emptying their hoses down there.
Yeah, they're testing it and running their drills and what have you. So that the water issue, I believe, obviously not in winter, can be dealt with quite easily. And all we should probably do is, before we are scheduled to start any work on site, whether it's our authority or somebody else's, that they be given their safe place with access and go from there. I mean, I guess you could look at site plans now and come up with a recommended location. And they'll be there for 2 or 3 years before anybody thinks
Yeah.
about doing anything to disturb that.
Exactly.
Well, we do anything, so at least 2 years.
Yep. Okay. So that's our next steps. Our next meeting's December 2nd. which I had already said, December 13th will be our special meeting with town council. That's a Monday, not a Thursday night, but it will be a Monday at 6:45, typical town council times. And then, pending everything is going well and we're moving along, we'll have another meeting on December 16th. So. that's
And
all-
it was, when is our future assessed? I'm just curious. Or do we have a future?
We do not have, we do not have a deadline, definitive deadline that has been given to us by council. So, I think we can set our own timeline. And as Steve has and then as I have, just continually report back to town council and let them know what's going on.
No, I meant the next, what is our next, or do we have a next reality?
The next reality would be our recommendation to town council on what the next step should be. I think it's well within our resolution to say, all right, we fulfilled the requirements of the current resolution. We feel that this can continue moving forward, so that will require some revision to the
So
council
we'd
resolution.
have to ask them to modify, to then
Exactly.
give us a new task.
Yep.
A couple things. I believe the way we were constructed, we are assembled concurrently with the council.
Yep.
So, in theory, we could continue for another 13 months without any change to the charter or whatever their mandate is to have us assembled and operational. I know there was a discussion at the council meeting Monday night around the police station. And they discussed public hearings and as well a timeline for bonding. And if I remember correctly, it's got, whatever would go to voters would have to be approved by the General Assembly, and it's got to get approved before the end of their session, which is the fiscal year, June 30, and actually needs more time than that. So I believe that wherever this goes, there's going to have to be some sort of public approval of funding through a bond.
Oh, no question.
And that will have to happen within the first 3 or 4 months of 2022, based upon what the bond council told the council and the timeline for funding. So I think where we are right now and where all this can go fits that schedule pretty well. And if they determine that they're going to go out to bond with the election of November 2022, we can be part of that discussion. So the timeline seems to fit, as well as our time frame for.
But does it really? We don't have an architectural firm under contract to take the next step.
I don't know that you need to have it to have, they didn't have one for the last bond that went out.
Yeah, but we really can't assign a dollar value
Yeah, I'd be a little
without
concerned because
a approved design.
we would essentially be in the situation that we are now, throwing a dollar amount to a project that we don't know how much it's gonna cost, similar to what happened with this building and the police station.
So is it unreasonable to think that we could get that level of information by that time?
By March?
By April?
It's a Herculean task, and we'd have to
We-
have our
we
feet
would-
on the ground.
We would have to have
In
approval
early January.
from town council to start moving at their next meeting. And I don't think that they're ready to let us go to the next step without seeing the results of our first step.
But what Tony is leading up to, which I think we all can, I personally agree with, the political reality is that if we, as a town, go and ask for anywhere from 8 to 13,
Whatever.
whatever that is for
Yep.
the police station, you know. If you don't include the 4 to 5, that will be the approximate range of the Halliwell development, the second one into the party is gonna be shown the door, more than likely, because I agree with the premise that, and the town council has to be aware of this. They know the politic of it, hopefully better than we do. So then the question is, they're gonna have to juggle, how long can they put off the police
Yep.
progress to let this catch up, so we go to the people once, we go to the assembly once?
That's it in a nutshell, right there. And if it doesn't happen within this time frame, then it's not gonna happen in November, next November, when they do intend, they talked about a public hearing on the police station, they do intend to do something.
Okay.
So if we don't find a way to put this together, it's gonna go beyond next November, and it's gonna have to go out to a special election. I think that's the reality of it.
And sadly, the special election usually has far less.
Yes.
Participation.
And are more difficult to get. I'm just trying to
Which is really
bring in the
good.
reality of the politics and the time frame.
No, I understand.
Thinking about what Robert brought up with the Y, which is probably our best option right now. Oh, and then there's many more, but it's the only option you can consider. If we could cut a deal with that we put up the building, we bond and put up the building, then they pay us rent to run the building, to be in the building, which would offset, hopefully, the majority of the payback of the bond to get that money. That could be a very acceptable for the public.
It certainly should be part of the discussion.
Thinking about that, plus the fact that everyone said, don't sell the property. So we don't want to sell the property to the Y. But if we cut a 30-year lease with them to rent that property that we're gonna build and we're gonna hold, but they're gonna pay us the rent to offset the bond payback. That could be a good thing. That, if everything works smoothly, you might be able to get it, but we'd have to move on it quick,
Yeah.
if that was the case.
So
But that's only one option, and there's many more.
yeah. So unfortunately, because this specific discussion is not listed on our agenda,
Yeah, we can't
on
go too far,
recommendations to
right.
town council and everything.
Right.
Because I saw the reaction a couple meetings ago when Steve brought up the RFQ that we had all looked at and recommended. I saw the reaction, and it was not a positive, warm and fuzzy feeling reaction. So I think the impression is, we need to check off our first box and report back. Because trust me, I would love to keep things moving as quickly as we can, understanding that timeline. When I was at the police station presentation and Counselor Vadney outlined that timeline, my ears perked up and I said, okay, what do we need to do to make sure that we're falling in line with this? And that, we stumbled, there were a couple stumbling blocks after the fact. So I think we need to have a good group discussion. And maybe that can be one of the items that we discuss at the town council meeting.
Yeah, that's
At
a
our
perfect
joint meeting.
workshop.
I think
item.
it
It's
absolutely
fundamental.
should be
It's
discussed.
fundamental.
And I
You know?
think at that.
Where are we
point-
going with
Yep.
this?
And at that point, we can say, we've already voted to recommend this RFQ. Here it is. We understand there's a time crunch with some of the bonding issues, and we'd like to be considered to be part of that, and submit that we, ask the finance director and the town administrator to put out the RFQ that we've drafted up already and reviewed, and let them make the decision to keep us going.
We already know that money, quote unquote, is there from the decommissioning, so it's
Right.
there. The only other thing that I would suggest is, when you read the resolution that created us, as I had noted to you.
Yep, and
Two of those items,
I did ask for
we
clarification.
haven't even, what do they mean? What we don't want to have happen is politics being politics. We don't want to give the presentation and then have
Right.
somebody read it, the ordinance or the resolution and say, gentlemen and ladies, why didn't you do these two things?
So I did ask for that clarification on Monday night, so we'll see.
What kind of response did you get?
They probably don't even remember they put it in.
This.
Really?
Yeah, It reads well, but it doesn't mean
So-
anything.
I mean, the only other building report that I know of that's current is the police station that just came out about a month ago. So that's on the town website, so feel free to peruse that. That was actually pretty informative, at least at my perspective. I thought it was pretty interesting. And the only other thing that I could point to is the town's comprehensive plan, which outlines what our, immediate goals are, our 5, our 10, our 20-year plans
It's
are.
very
So-
broad, very broad.
But there are goals and actions
Yeah,
that
true. Yeah.
we want to take a look
Yeah.
at, so, I would
So,
start there.
As long as we put it out there,
Right.
and we've done our job. We
Right.
asked for clarification. If they give us none,
Absolutely.
then we did what we were supposed to do.
Yep.
That's all I wanted to do,
Yep.
is make sure that we weren't blindsided by somebody
Right.
at the 11th hour.
Okay. All right, I said this was gonna be a 15-minute meeting, so here we are at almost an hour.
I'll move to adjourn.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? We have a second. Multiple seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned at 7:27. Thank you.